Hello, this is Brian, and for the next hour, I'll be reading from the May 26th issue of the Toronto Star on the Niagara Frontier radio reading service. Iran deal progress is murky after U.S. military says it carried out self-defense strikes. President Donald Trump insists a peace deal is close on this 88th day of the Iran war, but Iran on Tuesday denounced U.S. airstrikes as a sign of bad faith and unreliability as negotiations continue. Meanwhile, state media in Lebanon reports that Israel has killed 12 more people in another strike. Iran has demanded that any deal must include an end to hostilities in Lebanon and Gaza. In Washington, the president has a medical checkup on his schedule, and the redistricting war also continues. The Congressional Black Caucus is urging corporate America to get involved to save voting rights, ending a collective retreat during Trump's second presidency. In Texas, the Trump-backed sex scandal-plagued Ken Paxton is favored over Senator John Cornyn in Tuesday's GOP primary runoff election. FCC's sole Democrat warns media companies against yielding to Trump. Anna Gomez wakes up every morning and checks her phone to see if Trump has fired her yet. The sole Democrat on the Federal Communications Commission is urging media companies to fight back against efforts to silence free speech. In an extraordinary 4-page letter to Josh D'Amaro, the CEO of Disney, which is the parent company to ABC, Gomez described the FCC's sustained, coordinated campaign of censorship and control against the company under Chairman Brendan Carr, a Trump ally. She noted probes touching on diversity of practices, ABC's moderation of a 2024 presidential debate, guest bookings on The View, and calls for late-night host Jimmy Kimmel to be fired. She said the FCC's move for early reviews of ABC's local broadcast licenses is the most egregious assault on the First Amendment this FCC has taken to date. Iranian World Cup team will play in U.S. but sleep in Mexico. The Iranians will return each night to a base in Tijuana, Mexico after their U.S. group stage matches, President Claudia Sheinbaum has confirmed. Sheinbaum said at a news conference Monday that she was told by a FIFA representative that the U.S. was reluctant to have the Iranian soccer team spend time in the U.S. outside the stadiums while the war launched by the U.S. and Israel continues. The United States doesn't want the Iranian national team to stay overnight in the United States, Sheinbaum said. A FIFA representative then asked, "Can they stay overnight in Mexico?" And we said, "Yes, no problem. We have no issue with that," she said. A U.S. State Department statement Monday said Trump made it clear the Iranian team is welcome to participate. The statement did not address where the team might stay or Sheinbaum's comments. Lebanon hopes for an agreement that sees Israeli withdrawal. Israel's military clashed with Iranian-backed Hezbollah militants Tuesday along the strategic Litani River in Lebanon, as Israeli troops tried to push farther north, just 3 days before Lebanese and Israeli military delegations are set to meet for direct talks in Washington. A previously reached ceasefire appears more nominal by the day, complicating efforts at a broader peace in the Iran war, as Tehran wants an end to the fighting to include Lebanon. Israel says it will not withdraw until Hezbollah no longer poses a threat to residents of its northern towns. Hezbollah has vowed to continue fighting until Israel stops its daily airstrikes and withdraws its troops from Lebanon. Trump turns 80 next month as more Americans express concerns about his age. A Washington Post, ABC News Ipsos poll in April found that less than half of U.S. adults think Trump has the mental sharpness or physical health to serve effectively. I think concern for the president's physical health is probably at an all-time high, and I think advanced physical age is the number one concern, said Dr. Jeffrey Coleman, who served as a White House physician under Presidents Barack Obama, George W. Bush, and Bill Clinton. Coleman said a complete physical would include advanced heart testing, screening for common cancers, and a cognitive assessment. The White House has not disclosed what Trump's checkups will entail. President Trump is the sharpest and most accessible president in American history, who is working nonstop to solve problems and deliver on his promises, and he remains in excellent health, White House spokesperson Davis Ingalls said in a statement. U.S. consumer confidence is dented as gas prices remain high. U.S. consumer confidence declined slightly as gas prices remained at or above a national average of $4.50 a gallon in May, and inflation remained elevated, a sharp contrast to soaring stock prices that have neared record levels. The Conference Board's Consumer Confidence Index slipped 0.7 points to 93.1 in May, the first decline after 3 months of gains. The index follows a separate gauge of consumer sentiment compiled by the University of Michigan, which fell to a record low this month. Spikes in gas prices, as well as higher food costs, have worsened inflation, which has outpaced the growth in average paychecks in recent months, reducing most Americans' purchasing power. Polls show Americans have soured on Trump's economic policies, which could harm Republicans in this year's elections. Iran denounces U.S. strikes as a sign of bad faith, with impact on peace talks unclear. Iran on Tuesday denounced U.S. strikes a day earlier as a sign of bad faith and unreliability as negotiations continue toward a possible deal to end the war. The U.S. military said it acted with restraint in defensively targeting missile launch sites and boats placing mines. Iran's foreign ministry called the strikes a ceasefire violation and warned that the Islamic Republic of Iran will leave no act of aggression unanswered. Iran's Revolutionary Guard on Tuesday said it had shot down and deterred drones and a fighter jet that entered its airspace, according to Iran's official Mizan news agency, which did not say when this happened. Iranian Parliament Speaker Mohammad Bakir Kalibaf went to Qatar as part of the talks. The UK Maritime Trade Operations Centre said an explosion was reported Tuesday morning aboard a tanker in the Gulf of Oman. No one was injured, and there was no immediate information on the cause. Federal court blocks Alabama's plan for new U.S. House map. The new congressional map would give Republicans an advantage in a key House race this November, but the preliminary injunction issued by a 3-judge panel requires the state, at least for now, to instead use the same court-ordered districts under which congressional representatives were elected in 2024. Lawyers representing black voters argued that Alabama's map intentionally discriminates against black voters and that trying to change lines in the middle of an election year creates chaos. The state could appeal to the U.S. Supreme Court. Republicans want to use a new map that will give the GOP a chance to reclaim the seat now held by Democratic Representative Shomari Figures. U.S. stocks rise, oil falls after Trump said Iran talks are proceeding nicely. The price for a barrel of U.S. crude oil fell 3.8% to $92.99 on Tuesday, after resuming trading following the Memorial Day holiday, and U.S. stocks were catching up to others around the world that climbed after Trump said Iran talks were proceeding nicely. The S&P 500, Dow Jones Industrial Average, and NASDAQ Composite all rose Tuesday to near their all-time highs, even though fighting continued in the Mideast and the U.S. military said it struck Iranian missile launch sites and boats placing mines on Monday. Markets have rallied in the past on hopes for a coming end to the war with Iran, only to see the conflict drag on, causing painful inflation around the world. Congressional Black Caucus presses U.S. corporations to oppose Republican redistricting push. The Congressional Black Caucus is calling on major U.S. corporations to oppose Republican-led redistricting efforts that seek to eliminate majority black U.S. House districts. Their letter sent Tuesday urges more than 250 companies to condemn coordinated efforts to silence black voices at the ballot box. Some had co-signed their own message to Congress 5 years ago, urging lawmakers to pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, a Democratic proposal to restore and update the Voting Rights Act. That 2021 coalition, Business for Voting Rights, included Apple, Amazon, Google, Meta, Microsoft, Tesla, Salesforce, Target, PayPal, Intel, and Starbucks. Corporations that had profited from black consumers, relied on black workers, and amassed wealth in part from black communities cannot look away while black political power is dismantled in plain sight, the caucus chair, Representative Yvette Clarke, said in an interview. Trump arrives at Walter Reed Military Hospital for his latest physical. The White House said Trump would participate in a greeting with service members and hospital staff before he spends hours being examined by a team of doctors. It is the Republican president's fourth publicly disclosed medical exam since he returned to office in January 2025, and it comes as the nearly 80-year-old Trump tries to project strength going into November elections that will test his sway with voters. The White House says the visit is an annual preventative medical and dental check. Trump was last at Walter Reed in October and also had a physical there in April 2025. Last July, the White House said he'd been diagnosed with a condition common in older adults that causes blood to pool in his veins, causing the swollen ankles seen in some photos of Trump. The White House also has blamed handshaking for visible bruising on Trump's hands. Presidents are required to disclose health information. Presidents aren't required to disclose health information. There's no law requiring these disclosures, and the degree of transparency varies. Presidents for decades have released medical test results to try to reassure the public that they are up to the high-pressure job. But the president signs off on what is released, which raises questions about what isn't being shared. Trump's past medical reports have been criticized for offering scant detail and including statistics that some medical experts eyed with skepticism. It will be several hours before the White House releases any information about Tuesday's exam. Supreme Court won't intervene in discrimination suit led by black ex-head coach Flores against NFL. The Supreme Court on Tuesday refused to intervene in a discrimination lawsuit led by former Miami Dolphins head coach Brian Flores against the NFL, allowing the case to proceed toward trial. The justices rebuffed an appeal from the league, which wanted the case handled through its arbitration process rather than open court in New York. Justice Brett Kavanaugh dissented from the decision not to hear the case. Flores, who's black, sued the league and 3 teams in February 2022, alleging the league was rife with racism regarding its hiring practices when it comes to black coaches. He was later joined in the lawsuit by fellow black coaches Steve Wilkes and Ray Horton. Flores, who was fired by the Dolphins shortly before the suit was filed, is now the Minnesota Vikings defensive coordinator. The NFL has argued Flores should go through arbitration rather than the legal system, but lower courts have sided with the plaintiffs. The league said it respected the Supreme Court decision, which allows lower court rulings to stay in place, but is fully prepared to defend ourselves as this matter proceeds. David Gottlieb and Douglas Wigdor, attorneys for the plaintiffs, said they were pleased with the decision. The NFL must now accept that its commissioner cannot be the arbitrator over discrimination claims against the league and its teams. We look forward to litigating these claims in court, they said in a statement. Flores was fired after posing a 24-25 record over 3 years without a playoff appearance. The Dolphins did have back-to-back winning seasons before Flores was dismissed. Flores sued the NFL as well as the Denver Broncos, the New York Giants, and the Houston Texans. He interviewed with the Broncos in 2019 and the Giants and Texans in 2022. Wilkes, who was fired as the New York Jets defensive coordinator in December, joined the lawsuit by claiming the Arizona Cardinals in 2018 hired him as a bridge coach, promoting him to interim coach after they fired another coach, but then passing over him for the full-time role. He said the Cardinals didn't provide him with a realistic chance to succeed. Horton, who last coached in the NFL in 2019, alleged the Tennessee Titans didn't offer him a genuine interview for the head coaching position in 2016. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Toronto Star on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. As U.S. stock market hits new highs, 2 of 3 Americans are cutting back on spending, survey shows. U.S. consumer confidence declined slightly this month as gas prices stayed high and inflation remained elevated, a sharp contrast to soaring stock prices, hovering near record levels. The Conference Board's Consumer Confidence Index slipped 0.7 points to 93.1 in May, the first decline after 3 months of gains. The measure hasn't fallen as much this year as other gauges of consumer attitudes, but it has been stuck at a low level since the pandemic. Before COVID-19, it regularly reached 130. A separate gauge of consumer sentiment released last week by the University of Michigan fell to a record low this month. Soaring gas and food costs have worsened inflation that is outpacing the average growth in paychecks, reducing most Americans' purchasing power. Americans have soured on President Trump's economic policies, polls show, potentially creating problems for Republicans heading into the midterm elections. Consumer sentiment is mostly gloomy, even as the economy is still growing and the unemployment rate has stayed low. Some economists argue that the gap reflects inequality in a K-shaped economy, with higher income Americans benefiting from rising stock prices and still spending while lower income households struggle. Tuesday's Consumer Confidence Survey showed that confidence grew among households with incomes at or above $100,000, while it fell for most others. The prospect of higher prices and faster inflation continues to loom over confidence readings, with many households taking a more cautious approach to purchases this year, Ben Ayers, Nationwide senior economist, said. There were some positive signs, Ayers noted. Americans' expectations for growth 6 months in the future improved, potentially a sign they expect the Iran war to be over by then. Still, Americans' outlook on the job market worsened slightly. The proportion of respondents who said jobs are plentiful dropped to 25.5%, the lowest in 3 years. At the same time, just 18.6% said jobs were hard to get, the smallest percentage since October. The findings reflect the low-hire, low-fire job market that has made it harder for those out of work to obtain new jobs. Gas prices have soared to a nationwide average of $4.49 a gallon from $2.98 just before the war began at the end of February, and have been at or above $4.50 a gallon for nearly all of May. This month, the conference board added special questions to its survey, which found rising prices have caused most Americans to change their spending habits. 2/3 of respondents said they are cutting back spending in response to the increases, with most of those reducing overall purchases and delaying more expensive acquisitions. Many consumers are also planning to economize on clothes, shoes, hobby items, and toys and games, the survey found. Inflation jumped to 3.8% in April, the highest in 3 years, and far above the Federal Reserve's 2% target. In addition to more expensive gas, grocery prices have also started rising more quickly, likely driven by higher shipping costs. Beef prices have also risen sharply as drought and other factors have reduced cattle herds. The higher prices are reducing Americans' average inflation-adjusted incomes. Average hourly earnings, adjusted for price changes, shrank in April from a year earlier for the first time in 3 years. Other data also suggests consumers have grown more cautious amid rising prices. Adjusted for inflation, retail sales actually declined in April after a solid increase in March. And the University of Michigan's Consumer Sentiment Index fell to a record low 44.8 in May, its third straight decline, as a majority of respondents said rising prices were hurting their personal finances. Thousands still evacuated near Southern California chemical tank despite eased explosion fears. Thousands of Southern California residents still could not return home Tuesday as crews worked to keep cooling a damaged tank containing a hazardous chemical at an aerospace plant, despite officials saying the risk of a catastrophic explosion had largely passed. It's not over yet, T.J. McGovern, interim fire chief of the Orange County Fire Authority, said Monday. We still have to mitigate a fire and very small explosion concern and also a spill potential. Officials began ordering residents of Garden Grove near Los Angeles to evacuate their homes on Thursday after the tank overheated. About 16,000 residents out of the 50,000 evacuees were still waiting for the all clear. Exposure to methyl methacrylate, a highly flammable chemical used to make plastics, can cause serious respiratory problems, neurological problems, and irritation to the skin, eyes, and throat, according to the Federal Environmental Protection Agency. The tank at the GKN Aerospace Transparency Systems plant contained 6,000 to 7,000 gallons of the chemical. An evaluation of the tank showed a reduction of pressure inside thanks to a crack that was discovered Sunday. The interior had cooled to 93 degrees Fahrenheit, the county fire division chief Craig Covey said Monday, down from 100 degrees a day earlier. The company said its technical specialists and the county fire authority have removed insulation from the tank to help cool it. Health officials sought to reassure people who are returning to homes near the plant. There was no contamination, there were no fumes, there were not vapors that came from this incident, Orange County Health Director Regina Chincio Kwong said at Monday's news conference. There was not a leak, so you should feel comfortable going home, even if you are across the street from that new zone line. The South Coast Air Quality Management District will monitor the air for several months, and the EPA will be checking sewer and storm drains for spills, Orange County Supervisor Janet Wynn said. Relief among residents. Kim Yen, a retiree who had to evacuate her home 2 blocks from the plant, said she's ready to go back but wants to be sure it's safe first. I'm happy and many of us are happy, but still, we are still on our evacuation, she said Monday. The parking lot was full Monday at a large park in Fountain Valley, just southwest of Garden Grove, as people sought refuge in an ad hoc shelter there or pitched tents outside. Other people gathered in the park to enjoy Memorial Day. Yen added that she's been worried about the emergency crews. They are really our heroes, she said. Environmental risks remain. As the tank heated up, the chemical converted from liquid to gas, ramping up the pressure and explosion risk, said Andrew Welton, a Purdue University engineering professor who has studied environmental contamination. Some of the methacrylate may already have hardened into a stable plastic, similar to plexiglass, reducing the danger, he said. The tank could eventually cool enough for crews to safely stabilize and drain the remaining material without triggering a spark or ignition, Welton said. However, he said there is still the risk of an explosion while the chemical remains hot and reactive. Temperatures need to fall closer to 60 to 70 degrees Fahrenheit before conditions are considered significantly safer, he said. GKN is a British company that supplies aircraft manufacturers. GKN Aerospace Transparency Systems makes cockpit windows, canopies, and windshields for military and commercial aircraft. It employs about 16,000 people across 32 manufacturing sites in 12 countries, according to the company website. We apologize for the ongoing disruption this incident is causing, and our priority remains its safe resolution so that residents can return to their homes as quickly as possible, the company said. GKN Aerospace agreed in 2025 to pay state regulators more than $900,000 to settle violations involving record-keeping, permitting issues, and nitrogen oxide emissions, according to a report on the South Coast Air Quality Management District website. Exceptionally early heat wave shatters records and brings deaths in Europe. The UK smashed a century-old temperature record for the second time in 24 hours on Tuesday, as a spring heat wave continued to scorch parts of Western Europe, triggering government warnings about risks to life. Several drownings were reported in Britain and France as people tried to cool down. A temperature of 95 Fahrenheit was recorded at London's Kew Gardens and Heathrow Airport, Britain's Met Office Weather Service said, breaking the 94.6 degree Fahrenheit record set a day earlier at Kew. The provisional readings smashed the long-standing record of 91.4 degrees Fahrenheit set in 1922 and matched in 1944. London also recorded a rare tropical night, defined as one in which the temperature does not fall below 68 degrees Fahrenheit. Records also fell in France, where temperatures reached 97 degrees Fahrenheit on Monday in the country's southwest and widely remained above 20 degrees Celsius at night. The National Weather Service, Météo France, said a heat dome with heat held in place by a high-pressure weather front was producing temperatures more than 10 degrees Celsius above what used to be usual for this time of year. Unpredictable and extreme weather are becoming more frequent as Earth's warming builds. Experts say unprecedented and deadly weather extremes that sometimes strike at abnormal times and in unusual places are putting more people in danger. We know beyond a shadow of a doubt that heat wave events such as this have been made more likely and more severe due to climate change arising from our emissions of heat-trapping greenhouse gases, said Peter Thorne, director of the Icarus Climate Research Centre at Maynooth University in Ireland. But nevertheless, many of the records being set, particularly in the UK and France, are mind-bogglingly crazy. After a UK long weekend that sent people flocking to beaches, pools, and shady parks, London commuters sweltered on Tuesday in subway carriages without air conditioning. Trains to and from the busy Waterloo station were disrupted by a report of smoke on the tracks. In Scotland, firefighters worked through the night to douse a grass fire that sent smoke billowing from Arthur's Seat, the rocky hill that looms over Edinburgh. The UK Health Security Agency issued an Amber Health Alert for large parts of the country through Thursday, warning of a potential health risk, particularly among older people at the hottest times of the day. The UK is used to moderate temperatures, and many homes, schools, and businesses do not have air conditioning. At least 3 teenagers died in apparent drownings in UK lakes and reservoirs, and a 60-year-old man died in the sea in southwest England, authorities said. French government spokesperson Maud Brejon said there have been reports of at least 7 deaths potentially related to high temperatures, including 5 drownings and 2 deaths in sports competitions. The early heat wave has struck before the annual summer window when lifeguards watch over bathers at popular beaches, increasing risks. On France's Atlantic seaboard, where magnificent beaches have powerful riptides, officials reported a rash of emergencies in the surf, with 2 drowning deaths on Sunday at popular resorts in the Gironde region in the southwest. The top regional administrator, Sophie Brocas, urged beachgoers to exercise the utmost caution. The unreasonable heat extended to Spain, where Weather Service spokesperson Ruben del Campo said, "We find ourselves with temperatures we normally see in the middle of the summer, now in the month of May." He said Seville hit 100 degrees Fahrenheit over the weekend, while large parts of the Iberian Peninsula saw temperatures 5 to 10 degrees Celsius higher than normal. And in Rome, temperatures were expected to reach 89.6 degrees Fahrenheit on Tuesday. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Toronto Star on the Niagara Frontier radio reading service. America's tech-filled classrooms are facing a backlash against school-assigned devices. Just a few years ago, America's public schools were rushing to get every child a laptop. Los Angeles middle school teacher Anna Sofer remembers it well. The idea was that technology is the future, so we need to put tech in every child's hands. Now the conversation has flipped. After pouring billions of dollars into laptops, tablets, and learning apps, many schools are facing a digital reckoning. Classrooms have become saturated with screens, and a growing number of parents, teachers, and school districts are saying it is time to scale back. The Chromebook is just a world of distraction, says Sofer, who teaches 6th grade English and history. She favors pen and paper assignments, but is required to use laptops and online apps for certain activities. Every day I'm battling. Who would you rather listen to, Ms. Sofer or Minecraft? The Los Angeles Unified School District, where Sofer teaches, recently became the first major school district to say it will stop giving devices to its youngest students. It is part of a new screen time policy taking effect in the fall across the country's second-largest school system. A sweeping resolution passed last month by the Los Angeles School Board requires the district to eliminate devices until 2nd grade, set daily and weekly screen limits for all higher grades, block YouTube on school devices, and ban the use of devices at lunch and recess in elementary and middle school. The district will also audit its education technology contracts, which the teachers' union says amount to $1.6 billion. The Los Angeles crackdown is adding momentum to calls for reform emerging around the country. In many cases, parents lobbied a few years ago for school cell phone bans, which have now become the norm. Realizing phones weren't the only classroom distraction, they pivoted to a new target: school-issued devices. The campaign for change is becoming a public policy issue. At least 14 states have proposed laws to limit screen time in schools, according to Ballotpedia. The federal government issued an advisory last week warning that excessive screen use among youth is becoming a growing public health concern. Parents say school-issued devices undermine screen limits at home. In Los Angeles, concerned parents last year formed a group, Schools Beyond Screens, and pressured the district by speaking out at school board meetings, on social media, and in private talks with administrators. Many are frustrated by trying to curb screen time at home, only to have screens mandated by school. As a mother of 3, Katie Pace does everything in her power to limit screens. There is one family iPad and one television at home, no screen time during the week, and no screens allowed in bedrooms. Her 8th grade daughter, Clementine, does not have a phone. But as soon as Clementine gets on the Wi-Fi enabled school bus, her day takes a turn for the digital. For the 30-minute ride to school, Clementine watches YouTube videos on her school Chromebook. In Spanish class, assignments are on the app Duolingo, but many students use Google Translate for answers, Clementine said. Often kids are playing games on their phones, which are supposed to be locked away. In algebra, Clementine writes with her finger on a touchscreen to solve equations. In history, quizzes, tests, and writing assignments are on the computer. Almost all homework is online. Until recently, Clementine would come home and read a book, her mother said, but not anymore. On her daughter's device history, Pace sees she spends hours a day streaming music, making Spotify playlists, and watching makeup tutorials and cat videos on YouTube. It makes me furious, said Pace, a member of Schools Beyond Screens. My daughter went to middle school and was sent home with a screen addiction in her backpack. The pandemic supercharged student access to devices. A push to put a device in every child's hand and close the digital divide started over a decade ago, but it accelerated during the COVID-19 pandemic. Overnight, education shifted online in March 2020. Schools raced to get kids the devices needed to connect to school. When the 2021 to 2022 school year started, 96% of U.S. public schools reported they had given digital devices to students who needed them, according to the National Center for Education Statistics. Many schools switched funding away from textbooks, workbooks, and paper printouts to digital alternatives. Educational technology, or EdTech, exploded into a multi-billion-dollar industry. During the pandemic, getting kids devices was a lifeline. Now it's time that we reset, said Nick Melvoin, the LAUSD school board member who drafted the new resolution. Melvoin estimates that few Los Angeles classrooms are using screens effectively in ways that benefit learning. Too often, he said, teachers are replacing instruction with online apps and using screens as a crutch. Some schools are introducing new limits. The challenge, educators say, is that technology has become so entwined with learning, especially for older students, that unplugging from screens at school is complicated. In the affluent Philadelphia suburb of Lower Merion, parents launched a petition campaign for the right to opt their children out of digital devices during school, citing questions about EdTech's benefits. The district has said that opting out is not possible. If there's really no evidence that it helps, and in fact there's evidence that it's harmful, what are we doing? Test scores are at their lowest point, said Alex Bird-Becker, one of the founders of the group PA Unplugged. Other schools are finding that it makes financial sense to stop sending a device home with every child. Fresno Unified School District, the third largest in California, is spending $4 million a year to repair and replace laptops. Partly to cut costs, the district has told its 40,000 elementary school students to return their take-home laptops, and it will shift computer access to in-class only in the fall, spokesperson A.J. Cato said. The Simi Valley Unified School District near Los Angeles stopped sending devices home for its younger students this year. partly because of costly repairs, but also because they were being used for inappropriate Google searches and video games, according to a memo to parents. The district now stores the devices in carts at school. A group of parents in Arlington, Virginia, gathered on a recent Saturday night to share their children's struggles with screen addictions and other side effects of school-issued devices. None of us are Luddites. I know that technology adds value, but I also don't want my son on YouTube all the time, said Luann Oliver, who hosted the group in her living room. Her 6th grade son struggles to keep track of online assignments and resist the temptation the iPad offers for video games. We get reports on websites he's visited. He's visiting a game site in nearly every class. The Arlington Public Schools District has stopped giving iPads out before 1st grade and is setting new limits in elementary school, but students in 6th to 12th grades will still be required to have school-issued devices. Another mother, Jenny Sullivan, said she has noticed her 4th grade son capitalizing random letters and not getting corrected because there is so little work on paper. She also worries about social implications. Her 6th grader doesn't want to go to the after-school program because everyone is on their iPad. I'd rather be home, he tells his mother. After a 3-hour gathering, the parents made a plan to approach the school in the fall with a unified request to opt out of technology and opt in to textbooks and paper. 10 years from now, said one of the mothers, Christina Jackson, I can't imagine us looking back with any other reaction then. How could we have been so naive that we just handed these devices to our kids? Russia maintains attacks on Ukraine as Kiev is warned to brace for a possible major barrage. Russia fired more than 100 drones and 2 ballistic missiles at Ukraine overnight, the Ukrainian Air Force said Tuesday, as the country's foreign ministry noted that Moscow's recent threat to hit Kiev especially hard from the air brought nothing new. Russia on Monday urged foreign citizens, including members of diplomatic missions, to leave the Ukrainian capital as quickly as possible and told residents to steer clear of military and government facilities. It said that systematic strikes on Kiev were being prepared. Russia has regularly bombarded Kiev, often causing dozens of civilian casualties with every attack, since it launched an all-out invasion of neighboring Ukraine on February 24, 2022. Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov told U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio by phone Monday that the U.S. should evacuate its diplomatic staff from Kiev, a Foreign Ministry statement said. Rubio didn't say whether the U.S. State Department would take that step, but expressed concern during a trip to India that the terrible war in Ukraine could escalate further. The Trump administration has tried for more than a year to stop the war, but its efforts yielded no significant breakthrough and are now on ice as Washington focuses on the Iran war. No diplomats say they are leaving Kiev. There were no announcements of diplomatic departures from Kiev. The European Union, French and Polish delegations publicly said that they would not leave. The European Union summoned Russia's representative in Brussels to convey its concerns Tuesday, with European Commission spokesperson Anita Hipper accusing Russia of trying to sow panic. French Foreign Ministry spokesman Pascal Convreau called the Russian threat new intimidation from Moscow. The level of security threats posed by Russia to Kiev and other Ukrainian cities remains the same as in previous years and months, Ukraine's foreign ministry said in a statement late Monday. Russia has continuously launched missile and drone attacks on the capital, it pointed out, adding that Ukraine was prepared to assist diplomatic missions seeking additional security measures. Russia could target bunkers, officials says. Andrei Kartapolov, head of the Defense Affairs Committee in Russia's State Duma, said that the Ukrainian parliament and presidential office aren't among potential targets. Kartapolov said that possible attacks could aim at underground bunkers used by various branches of Ukraine's armed forces, security agencies, and other government structures. Those are well concealed and fortified facilities, and our task is to spot and target them with the weapons we have, Kartapolov said in remarks carried by Parliamentskaya Gazeta, the official publication of the Russian parliament. Russia said its biggest missile attack of the year last weekend was in response to Friday's deadly Ukrainian drone strike on what Moscow said was a college dormitory in Starobilsk, a city in Ukraine's Russia-occupied Luhansk region. But the Ukrainian General Staff said that its strike in Starobilsk hit the local headquarters of the Russian military's special drone unit. Ukraine remains short of air defense missiles. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said that sophisticated American-made air defense systems that Ukraine needs in order to stop Russian ballistic missiles are in short supply because of the Iran war. Unfortunately, there has been no progress for a long time with America on expanding the production of anti-ballistic capabilities, Zelensky said on social media late Monday, adding that Kiev is working with Europe to improve its own anti-ballistic capabilities in sufficient quantities. He said that Ukrainian battlefield gains in recent months have enabled it to stabilize the 780-mile front line in eastern and southern Ukraine, suggesting that Kiev's forces are holding their own against Russia's bigger army. Russia's spring offensive is floundering as Ukraine's mid-range drone strikes disrupt its rear supply lines, according to the Institute for the Study of War. Moscow's warning of major strikes aims to distract public attention from its poor battlefield performance and an economic pinch caused by war costs and international sanctions, the Washington-based think tank said late Monday. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Toronto Star on the Niagara Frontier radio reading service. North Korea launches ballistic missile and other weapons over the sea in latest show of force. North Korea launched a close-range ballistic missile and other weapons toward the sea on Tuesday, South Korea's military said, days after the leaders of Russia and China voiced their opposition to Western pressure on North Korea. The missile fired from Jeonju, a city near the northwest coast, flew about 80 kilometers or 50 miles, South Korea's Joint Chiefs of Staff said. North Korea launched other kinds of projectiles, it said, but didn't elaborate. South Korean media, citing the military, reported the other weapon systems mobilized include multiple rocket launch systems. The report said that the simultaneous launches of different kinds of weapons were likely meant to test an ability to evade South Korean and U.S. defenses. South Korea's military said that it closely monitors activities in North Korea. It said that South Korea, with a solid alliance with the U.S., maintains a readiness to repel any provocations by North Korea. It was North Korea's first weapons launch event since April 19th, when the country fired multiple short-range missiles in what state media described as a demonstration of cluster bomb warheads. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un has focused on modernizing his nuclear and missile arsenals since his nuclear diplomacy with U.S. President Donald Trump collapsed in 2019. In recent years, Kim has expanded ties with Russia by sending troops and conventional arms to support its war efforts against Ukraine. Kim has also pushed to cement cooperation with China, North Korea's economic pipeline. In their summit in Beijing last week, Russian President Vladimir Putin and Chinese President Xi Jinping expressed their opposition to foreign policy isolation, economic sanctions, military pressure, and other methods of creating threats to the security of North Korea, according to a statement from the Kremlin. Russia and China, both veto-wielding members of the UN Security Council, have previously frustrated the U.S. and others' efforts to toughen international sanctions on North Korea despite its banned weapons tests. Trump has repeatedly expressed his desire to resume talks with Kim, but Pyongyang has responded that Washington must first drop demands for the North's nuclear disarmament as a precondition for talks. Kim has taken an increasingly hardline stance toward South Korea, calling it his country's most hostile enemy and taking steps to terminate all ties with its neighbor. In a meeting with military commanders last week, Kim discussed efforts to strengthen military units along the border with South Korea, in line with a state objective to turn the borderline into an impregnable fortress, according to state media. On Tuesday, South Korean President Lee Jae-myung called for stronger efforts to advance the country's military. In televised remarks during a regular cabinet meeting, he emphasized artificial intelligence and drone capabilities and the potential acquisition of a nuclear-powered submarine, an issue that has been part of his diplomacy with Washington. Lee, a liberal who espouses improved ties with North Korea, didn't specifically comment on the threats posed by the North, but he stressed the importance of South Korea demonstrating the resolve to take responsibility for and protect our own security ourselves, saying such a posture would also strengthen the country's alliance with the United States. Israel's military says it's striking Hezbollah sites in Lebanon as Netanyahu vows to increase the blows. Israel's Air Force targeted sites belonging to Hezbollah in Lebanon, including in the country's eastern Bekaa Valley, late on Monday, as Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu vowed to intensify attacks on the Lebanese militant group. Netanyahu's warning came as Hezbollah has been firing fiber optic drones, a weapon used widely in the war in Ukraine, at Israeli forces in southern Lebanon and northern Israel in recent weeks. We will hit them. It's true that they are shooting drones at us, fiber optic drones. We have a special team working on that, and we will solve that too, Netanyahu said in a video posted on social media. What this requires of us now is to increase the blows, to increase the intensity. We will smite them hip and high. Lebanon's state-run national news agency that said that after Netanyahu's post, some residents started leaving Beirut's southern suburbs, where Hezbollah has large presence. The agency also said several airstrikes hit the eastern town of Mashgara in the Bekaa region on Monday night. Meanwhile, Hezbollah said that it carried out 8 attacks earlier in the day, including a drone attack on Israeli troops in Mizgaf Am in northern Israel. The daily attacks between Israel and Hezbollah have been ongoing despite a U.S.-brokered ceasefire in place since April 17th. A U.S. State Department official said earlier on Monday that Hezbollah has ignored repeated requests to stop firing at Israel, including a recent ultimatum. The official, who is not authorized to talk to the media and therefore spoke on condition of anonymity, added that Israel will never be expected to passively absorb attacks on its forces and civilians. Since the ceasefire went into effect, Hezbollah has fired over 1,000 drones and over 700 rockets to try and derail ongoing negotiations between Lebanon and Israel, the official said, adding that the status quo is untenable. Last month, Lebanon and Israel began their first direct talks in more than 3 decades, with meetings held in Washington. Lebanese and Israeli military officials are to meet again on Friday at the Pentagon to discuss the ceasefire, Israel and the United States are seeking to have Hezbollah disarmed. The State Department official said the direct Lebanon-Israel talks and the implication that Lebanon stands to get significant support from the U.S. is a threat to the Iran-backed Hezbollah, along with a challenge to its narrative of resistance against Israel. A successful ceasefire led by the government of Lebanon would strip Hezbollah of their power and their narrative, the official said. Earlier Monday, an Israeli airstrike on the southern village of Far Ramon killed 4 people and wounded 3, the Lebanese NNA reported. It said Israeli drone strikes on other parts in the south, including one on a road near the municipality of Far Ramon, killed 3 people. The Israel military said that throughout the day, it struck more than 70 Hezbollah infrastructure sites. The latest Israel-Hezbollah war began on March 2nd, when Hezbollah fired rockets into northern Israel, 2 days after the U.S. and Israel began their attacks on Iran. More than 3,000 people have been killed in Lebanon in the latest fighting, according to the Lebanese Health Ministry. Also, 22 Israeli soldiers and a defense contractor have been killed in or near southern Lebanon, and 2 civilians have been killed in northern Israel, according to Netanyahu's office. You've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the May 26th issue of the Toronto Star. Your reader has been Brian. Thank you for listening.